Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and this is going to be an update 1 to the Mythic Plus tier list that I made for healers because there were so many comments about do a weekly update, check each healer every week based on the changes that happen for that week, and this is exactly what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be changing the ranking of each healer because I'm going to be testing them every single week. Big disclaimer guys, this is not a meta prediction, it's far too early for that. We're going to be testing healers based on whether I enjoy them and based on how well they did in these Poke plus 20 keys on PTR. Now keep in mind guys, there's a lot of ifs here because guess what, we're always a week behind. Blizzard always issues a new PTR build around Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they only open Mythic Plus testing during the weekend. New changes come out, I only get to test them out during the weekend, then I publish a video again Monday, Tuesday around that time, and then a new build comes out very shortly. So we're always trailing behind because we want to test out every single healer ourselves. Again, in Mythic Plus, in poke situations, we don't want to make a video just based on the patch notes. Again, this is not a meta prediction. We're going to be doing meta predictions later down the line where we're going to take into account healer damage and utility a lot more depending on how the damage patterns are going to look for healers approaching high Mythic Plus content. And on top of that, Blizzard hasn't really decided about scaling, guys. The first week, the scaling was about, again, you get scaled up to something like 456 item level. This week, it's 440. Blizzard, please decide on which item level you want us to test because the numbers are going to look very different from week 1 to week 2 because of how scaling works in Mythic Plus, or maybe just Blizzard is unsure about this. Rant over, let's go to ranking healers. And we're going to start off with Restoration Druid. This is the tier list that I made last time, and again, this is something that I'm going to be updating every single week. We're going to start off with Resto Druid, like I said, and Resto Druid changes. Scenarios Guidance no longer spawns an additional Grove Guardian at the beginning of Incarnation Tree of Life. Scenarios Guidance now reduces the cooldown of Incarnation Tree of Life by 5 seconds when Grove Guardian fades, used to be 4 seconds, and Grove Guardians are now present as a totem bar. So this is cutting down the Grove Guardian, the amount of Grove Guardians you can have, especially if you're running that Reforestation, if you're running that Tree of Life build, because if you're going into Tree of Life, the second you go into Tree of Life, whether it's going to be by pressing Tree of Life or whether it's going to be by using Tree Swiftments and going into Tree of Life through Reforestation, Grove Guardian will spawn immediately, and then one Grove Guardian would spawn every 10 seconds. So this interaction has been nerfed because you're not going to be spawning Grove Guardian the second you go into Tree of Life, which is pretty significant nerf to something like Reforestation, because in Reforestation you get 2 Grove Guardians, but now you're only getting 1. And I feel this is a build that I ran and tested in terms of raids. I did run this build in raid situations because I wanted to check out how many Grove Guardians you could have, how, like, Grove Guardians are a pretty substantial portion of Resto Druid life right now because of how much healing it does through your 2-set bonus and things like that. Grove Guardian, again, Blizzard is balancing or building on top of Grove Guardian. I did not really run this build in Mythic Plus situations. Could you run this? You could test it out and things like that. Now for my testing, I was mainly running different builds in terms of Convokes, and Flourish, in terms of Convoke and Verdant Infusion, because I thought Verdant Infusion could be interesting to test out because, again, Flourish is getting quite significant nerfs. Now a lot of people thought that everything is over with Flourish nerfs and things like that. I don't think it's that bad if you compare it to other 1-minute cooldowns, because yes, Flourish is a 1-minute cooldown now. It's no longer 1 minute and a half because Blizzard did see the nerfs to be quite substantial. Something like Disciplined Priest has Evangelism, which is 1.5 minute cooldown. It extends the duration of your atonements by 6 seconds, and that's it. Flourish, 1 minute cooldown, extends the duration of your hots by 6 seconds, and on top of that, increases the rate of hots and things like that. Sky is not falling with Flourish nerfs so far, so I've tested multiple builds in terms of Convokes, in terms of Flourish, in terms of Verdant Infusion, in terms of doing different types of damage, and honestly, Druid has been a little bit of an enigma for me in terms of the DPS, because I was very reluctant about trying out the Starfire build. Starfire and Rat has been buffed by 90%, and that is a pretty significant buff to your DPS. And now that will probably change the way you approach Mythic Plus dungeons in terms of providing damage, because healers do have to provide damage, but this is very important. I did finally test out that Boomkin, Starfire plus Master Shapeshifter build, where you're just basically spamming Starfire and large Trashback balls. Not only you're getting insane amount of DPS in terms of AoE that Starfire can do, because, hey, Starfire is buffed by things like your Master Shapeshifter, and it has also been buffed by 90% by Blizzard. Not only you're doing an insane amount of AoE damage if you're able to squeeze in a couple of Starfires during Trashback, you're also getting a significant amount of mana back. So I got to test out this build. I was going into Moonkin, I was spamming Starfire when I could in these AoE Trashback pulls. I was doing a good amount of AoE damage, and my mana issues were non-existent. So now, not only, in my opinion, you can still provide a good amount of healing as Resto Druid, and we can go to the ranking here. You can provide a good amount of healing as Resto Druid. I think it's quite easy to do healing as Resto Druid because your continuous healing is quite strong because things like Wild Growth were buffed from last week and things like that. That's still evident. I think you can have multiple or run multiple different builds depending on whichever you prefer. I was running, again, Master Shapeshifter. I thought that was really good in terms of the damage it provides. And again, it eliminates your mana issues, which I did. I did have mana issues in the previous weeks when I was testing. So Druid actually felt better now because I was running better builds. And I think Resto Druid still deserves that S tier spot here based on what I've seen. So even though Resto Druid did get nerfed depending on which talent build you're running, I still think it felt really strong. Again, you can mix and match your talents. I think there's going to be a lot of viable builds depending. Again, I did discover the new DPS build, which was a significant portion of boon to the actual Resto Druid numbers, but I'm not a huge fan of Starfire. In terms of gameplay, trying to squeeze in Starfire as Resto Druid, especially during large trashback where there is a lot of AoE damage happening, or you need a lot of healing, felt quite awkward. But I do think that the Starfire build does require a decent amount of, has a skill ceiling to it, because for example, you can stay or you can play a mini game with yourself. You can stay in the Boonkin or Moonkin form, try to cast as many Starfires, and you can still cast things like Regrowth, you can still cast things like Adaptive Swarms, you can still cast, again, you can still provide additional healing, you can cast things like Grove Guardians. You can heal while in Boonkin form, not to the full potential, but you can still provide a decent amount of healing, and you can play a game with yourself where, how long can I stay in this Boonkin form and cast Starfires during these trash packs and provide as much damage as possible, which is something that I tried. Circle of Life and Death is kind of back. They kind of removed liveliness and they brought back Circle, which I'm not a huge fan of Circle in terms of what it does to Resto Druid in Mythic Plus situations, in terms of adding a lot more GCDs, in terms of pressing buttons all of the time. So I hope that's not going to be meta. I hope Master Shapeshifter is going to be meta for Resto Druid because it just feels better in terms of providing additional damage and actually getting mana back. For the people who might say, why do I need to deal damage as a healer and things like that? I signed up to be a healer. Think of Master Shapeshifter as a way to get yourself mana back. Because Resto Druid can have mana issues depending on how you play, depending on which affixes, depending on what your group is. Think of Master Shapeshifter as a way to regen your mana faster, which also helps you with DPS. Overall, I still think Resto Druid is in a very, very solid spot. And now let's go to Preservation Evoker. And again, there has been quite a few nerfs to a lot of healers. I think the concept of this video is that which healer received the least amount of nerfs in terms of, you know, gaining in that tier list. So Preservation Evoker, they reverted the healing increase to Spirit Bloom, which might not be viewed as a nerf, but technically if you played the first week, Spirit Bloom was healing for more, and now it's not healing that much. Honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal breaker because your 2-set bonus just feels so powerful in terms of providing additional healing on top of that, and most of the time it just would go into overhealing. So even though they nerfed Spirit Bloom to some extent because they reverted the buff, Spirit Bloom still felt powerful, and your 2-set bonus still felt powerful because a lot of that was going into overhealing. You have to remember, 2-set bonus is going to shoot out Living Flames based on which empowered abilities you're using, and then rewind has been reduced. This is something that Blizzard has done for majority of healers. They nerfed a lot of damage reduction cooldowns, they nerfed a lot of HPS cooldowns across the board just to make healing harder in raid. I actually genuinely feel a lot of the changes that happened to healers so far has been aimed for raids and not specifically for Mythic Plus. And that's something that is quite evident, and I'll talk about this. But if we talk about our experience as Preservation Evoker in terms of Mythic Plus testing, I genuinely feel I had a good time with Preservation Evoker. I actually think the 2-set bonus carries a lot. I think the 4-set bonus is very average. I don't like the randomness associated with it, but I think your empowered abilities can pack a punch. I think your DPS feels powerful. I think your healing can feel powerful, but there is a lot of if statements for Preservation Evoker. If you're running content where there's a lot of range, your range limitations are still evident. I do think, again, a little bit of a prediction in terms of when it comes to 10.2, I do think melee are going to be more important aspect of Mythic Plus compositions, just because, again, rogues, Outlaw Rogue is absolutely insane right now. It's gonna get nerfed. It almost doubles or triples the damage of the next damage dealer. It's crazy in Mythic Plus. Outlaw is really strong. There's a lot of, again, there's a melee legendary coming and things like that. So I think there's going to be more emphasis on melee. And if there is going to be more emphasis on melee, I think Preservation Evoker range limitations are going to be non-existent. I think your Dream Breath is going to be easier to use. I think you're going to be able to heal a bit better. I think it's going to be a more, how do I say, a more pug-friendly environment. But if there isn't a lot of melee, range limitations can be a problem. But generally speaking, I do think I'm very, very, how do I say, I'm almost thinking about placing Preservation Evoker a little bit higher than B tier, but I think the big ifs are still there, and the biggest if of them all, by the largest mile, is Augmentation Evoker. Augmentation Evoker changes have not been significant enough to bring down augmentation from being, how do I say, mandatory in Mythic Plus. You still need that support role, at least it's looking like that. We'll have to see what the changes are going to be next week, but basically I think augmentation has a very high chance of overshadowing preservation, or overshadowing devastation right now. So it really depends on how augmentation is going to do, because you don't really want to stack multiple classes in terms of utility. And again, preservation in terms of high keys is going to live or die based on augmentation, and augmentation is still looking like it's surviving. But overall, I think if you're liking Preservation or Evoker in Season 1 and Season 2 and things like that, I think you're gonna like Preservation Evoker in Season 3. I'm expecting a big drop-off in Preservation Evokers, because I don't think a lot of Preservation Evokers are willing to take the chance, or at least high-key pushing Evokers are willing to take a chance of being asked to reroll to Augmentation, which could happen if nothing changes. Let's move on to our next healer. I'm going to place my Preservation Evoker where it is right now for the time being. So now let's go to my boy Mistweaver Monk, because Mistweaver Monk has been taking quite a few Ws lately. Might not be considered to be a complete W in terms of healing elixir changes. I'm gonna rant on a lot about this, but Jade Serpent Statue Soothing Mist Healing increased by 40%. Again, Jade Serpent Statue is something that you run as a Mistweaver Monk in raid situations in terms of live. Unison is something that people are running as well. It's something that I was testing. I was testing my Mistweaver Monk in raid environments as well, running these talents and things like that. So that's something, again, that's kind of cool. In terms of 2-set bonus, this is actually 4-set bonus. I don't know why they said 2-set bonus, but Chi Harmony now stores 20% of the healing instead of 15. And they also mentioned in another blue post specifically to Mistweaver Monks that are going to try and fix the 4-set bonus, because the 4-set bonus right now is not really that good, because it's not storing the appropriate amount of healing into the 4-set, which again, next week, maybe in 2 weeks or whatever, it's going to be fixed. Blizzard has mentioned that they're going to fix it, and the 4-set bonus should feel a lot more impactful. So Mistweaver is 100% going to rise. Very, very good. In terms of healing elixir changes, this is something that they're now making it a passive effect, where you consume a healing elixir when you drop below 35% health. And then they made additional blue posts where they mentioned, hey, we made the healing elixir passive. I know there's a lot of Mistweaver Monks who are doing high-end keys, and they're pressing healing elixir really, really a lot. Like, because it is off the GCD, that's the big point. Off the GCD abilities, like a healing elixir, is insanely powerful when you're about to die and you need to survive. Healing elixir is going to be part of your base rotation, and I think Blizzard was like, we don't want this to be part of your base rotation. We want to, again, they're looking at Expel Harm, and again, Expel Harm, there is a lot of ifs about this change. There's the blue post that they mentioned, I wasn't a huge fan of where they're heading with this. I genuinely believe they should either revert the healing elixir change, or maybe give another option in terms of the talent, or let's consider Holy Paladin. They're looking at Mistweaver Monk as a melee healer, and they're looking at Mistweaver Monk and they're saying that it's kind of squishy, and I agree. Mistweaver Monk is a melee. Actually, Mistweaver Monk is a lot more melee than something like Holy Paladin is. Mistweaver actually loses so much of their healing if they can't be in melee, especially if you're running that fist weaving build. So they need to feel sturdy, and why not give Mistweaver Monk Sanctified Plates equivalent? Because Sanctified Plates is something that is extremely powerful for Paladins in general in terms of making them sturdier. You can do that too with something like Mistweaver Monks or Monks in general to add additional passive defensives, so they don't have to press a button every time there's something bad happening. Rant over. Let me know how I feel about this. Generally speaking, I think Mistweavers, I think something's going to happen in the future. I think Blizzard is going to fix this. A lot of people are going to be upset about this in terms of high key pushers, but I still think Mistweaver Monk is doing really well in Mythic Plus content. I was running Wake Rest Mana, and honestly, Wake Rest Mana is just made for Mistweaver Monk. Again, spin to win is real. Pressing Phalanx Stomp and spinning Crane Kick, you can do so much passive damage, and passive healing is absolutely insane. I actually think Monk is a true representation of what the melee healer feels right now, because you're actually doing healing. There's been so many changes to Mistweaver Monk that increased your Mythic Plus performance. I'm hoping Blizzard acknowledge that Mistweaver Monk does not feel, or it feels quite not sturdy, not really, needs extra defensive. So I'm hoping that's going to be fixed. So far, I honestly really, I could really place Mistweaver Monk higher than A tier, because I've been having a blast on Monk right now. Probably, arguably one of the most fun healers right now, because you actually see bars move. You can play your melee playstyle and do really, really well. Now, in terms of raiding, there is a lot of, again, I was running the caster build in terms of you know, Clouded Focus in Yulon. And again, some people are gonna hate that, some people are gonna like that. I'm not sure if that's going to be the build that's gonna emerge in raiding, but I already know people who really like melee. They don't really like the Clouded Focus build in raid, so I think it's gonna divide some people. But generally speaking, Mistweaver Monk is doing really, really nice. If Mistweaver Monk received something like Sanctified Plates or additional damage or this additional defensives in terms of being a melee healer, if Mistweaver Monk receives something like Bloodlust or Balres, if Mistweaver Monk's range, and that's probably the biggest issue, melee range would be increased by a little bit, because if you cannot stand in melee range as a Fistweaver, it gets really scary in terms of trying to keep the party alive. If those things happen, Mistweaver is S tier. Easy S tier, everyone re-rolls, everyone is going to play Mistweaver Monk. Big ifs, but if those big ifs happen, I think Mistweaver will be in a really good position, so therefore I'm still going to be placing Mistweaver in A tier, but Mistweaver is definitely going to gain value when the force set is going to be fixed, hopefully soon. And now let's go to Holy Paladin in terms of the changes in terms of my ranking, because I did not really rank Holy Paladin properly. I did not rank Discipline Priest, and again, I didn't really change a lot of things here, but I'll talk about this more in the summary of the video. So Holy Paladin healing has been reduced by 5%, more healing reduction. Hand Divinity now increases the healing of Holy Light by 40%, was 80%. I'm not sure if this is to do with the fact that your Holy Light healing has been increased by default. Saved by the Light Absorb Shield has been increased. Blessed Focus now increases the healing of Glimmer of Light by 40%. No one was really using Blessed Focus ever, so I'm guessing Blizzard is trying to make this not much of a dead talent as it was. Merciful Aura healing is now increased by 20%. Aura Mastery is active, and Merciful Aura healing is increased by 15%, so they're trying to give you more passive healing from it, I guess, instead of giving you like cooldown feel to it. Touch Light healing now increased by 500%, it was 700%, so that's a nerf. Word of Glory, this is a pretty nice one. Word of Glory healing increased by 10%. This is something that probably most of the Holy Paladins really wanted. They wanted additional healing increases to your basically Holy Power, to your Holy Power spenders in terms of Light of Dawn, in terms of Word of Glory, because a lot of the times you could be running something like, you could be playing your Holy Paladin and only using your just spenders, and a lot of times based on Blessing of Dawn. And in Mythic Plus content, you could just be using your Holy Power in terms of pure DPS. Or in terms of raids, you might be casting it based on a Blessing of Dawn in terms of whether you're tracking it or not. Because again, a lot of Holy Paladins would not be afraid to overcap Holy Power in terms of just, hey, I'm just going to keep casting Holy Shock. I don't really care about casting Holy Power right now. I don't have Blessing of Dawn buff anyways. It doesn't matter. Because that's where Holy Power spenders were kind of lying, because they're just not providing a whole lot. Now, Word of Glory healing increased by 10%. Is that going to be big enough to offset the value? Honestly, I don't fully... I'm not 100% sure. I need to test that a little bit more in terms of... Again, it's going to make Word of Glory a little bit better. 10% is not the best buff I've ever seen, but it's something that Blizzard is acknowledging, and I think that's a good thing. Barrier of Fate now creates an Absorb Shield based on 25% of healing done was 50%. Again, I don't know if this is a nerf specifically to do with the fact that Flash of Light and Holy Light were buffed by default last week in terms of the spot healing that they provide. And Aura Master now increases the effectiveness of Devotion Order to 12%, was 15%. This is something that happened to most of the healers out there. For example, Discipline Priest Barrier has been nerfed from 25% damage reduction to 20%. So damage reduction cooldowns, HPS cooldowns, they're all being nerfed to make, in my opinion, raid healing harder. I think a lot of these changes are to do with raid healing. Again, I'm not sure what they're gonna do with Light of Dawn in terms of the healing that it provides, but I think there is a lot of doom and gloom about Holy Paladin. I think there is a lot of people who are very scared about how Holy Paladin is going to perform both in raids and Mythic Plus, because in my opinion, it's not mainly about the nerfs to Holy Paladin, but it's about the buffs to the rest of the healers. Holy Paladin doesn't really have a monopoly on single target or spot healing anymore. It really doesn't. All of the other healer spot heals has been increased. A lot of other healer spot healing has been increased by 40-50%, and for Holy Paladin, they did buff things like Flash of Light and Holy Light, but that kind of takes away from that melee gameplay, and I think a lot of players, at least in my circles, have been very unhappy or a little bit unhappy about where Holy Paladin is heading. And I think, again, for me personally, my guild asked me to play Holy Paladin in raids because no one in our guild wants to play Holy Paladin. I'm not sure what it's like for you, but I think people are a little bit scared about where the gameplay is going to be heading in terms of, are you going to be doing a lot more hard casting? And a lot of players who initially started playing Holy Paladin, I think there's a lot of players who initially started playing Holy Paladin in 10.15 during the rework because the melee gameplay was really fun. You still didn't have to hard cast all that much. That might change in the future, we'll have to see. But guys, it's a Holy Paladin. Historically speaking, Holy Paladin has been most of the time one of the most meta healers there ever has been in World of Warcraft. It's one of those healers that's been meta the most times, both in Raid and Mythic Plus. It still provides good utility. You still have battle res. You're still extremely sturdy, extremely tanky. You still have a lot of utility. You still can provide, again, based on my testing, you can still provide good damage and healing depending on how you're going to be playing. I do miss the power of Holy Prism. I'm not gonna lie. You don't have the tier set anymore, and Holy Prism just doesn't do anything, it seems. So I'm not even sure if it would be running Holy Prism. I just wanted to test how Holy Prism felt without the 4 set or without the tier set, and it just wasn't there. So I'm going to place Holy Paladin somewhere here. I still think, again, we're not looking at utility and healer damage too much. We're just looking at the healing capabilities and how you can carry these plus 20 groups in PTR and things like that. And I still think you can have a good time as Holy Paladin. You can still provide, again, you're still a melee healer in terms of what you provide. I'm just not sure where the gameplay is going to head in the future in terms of, again, holy power spenders. I'm happy Word of Glory got buffed, because you do need buffs to holy power spenders. I'm still going to wait and see where the gameplay is going to head. But if the gameplay for Holy Paladin is going to be more about hard casting, that's definitely going to be a big turnoff for me in terms of playing this class, because in terms of my enjoyment, I think 10.15 rework for Holy Paladin was really, really nice. If they could keep the similar gameplay, I would be really happy. But because they're buffing single target or spot healing of every single healer, I think the balance is becoming a little bit iffy. But hopefully Blizzard is going to get there. I still secretly think Holy Paladin, again, this is a big tinfoil hat prediction. I still think Holy Paladin is going to be meta when it comes to 10.2, whether it's going to be Raid or Mythic Plus, because I still think you'll want Holy Paladin in Raids in terms of what he provides through beacon healing, through damage reduction, to passive damage and things like that. And I still think Holy Paladin has a chance in Mythic Plus because it is a Holy Paladin. It is the blessed child of World of Warcraft, arguably or historically speaking, a healer that has almost always been meta, depending on which season, because that's just the historical data. So we'll see how Holy Paladin ends up. Let me know how you feel about Holy Paladin changes so far. And now let's go to Priest. I'm gonna look at Discipline Priest first. Again, I don't want to cover every single change because the video would be too long, but they changed the way Power Life works now, and now it's only usable on targets below 35%. Which again prevents you from wasting it. It also increases the healing by a little bit more, but the cooldown is a little bit longer, depending on how you used to use Power Life before. So again, I view this as a bit of a quality of life improvements, because it's not usable below targets 35%, because you could waste it a lot of times. But this one, Priest has seen probably the most significant changes that happened too, because it probably was like unfinished state. It was definitely in a relatively unfinished state in terms of what happening. I don't want to talk about too much here, but they basically changed Shadow Covenant. So in week 1, you could have, if you played Mindbender, you could have Shadow Covenant almost permanently, based on, depending on how many smites you got to squeeze in that Shadow Covenant window and things like that. And Shadow Covenant would just be, it just would have a really high uptime. And Blizzard looked at that and they were like, we want to make sure that you don't have to just run Mindbender. Maybe you should be running Shadow Fiend and things like that. And so technically your uptime of Shadow Covenant is going to be lower, depending on, it's going to be lower regardless of which Shadow Fiend or Mindbender you're going to be running. But, and it's going to be a little bit weaker, but you're going to be compensated with penance. And I think that's, I tried out, again, I did do a lot of testing with Discipline Priest, because not only that, they also looked at talents like Expiation. Again, this change, at least on PTR, was not available, or maybe it was a tooltip issue, or like there was some issues with this. I don't think this was live, and I did not really get to test it out. Anyways, Wheel and Woe has been, again, there's a lot of talents for Discipline Priest that are just unusable, not viable, because they would rely on other buttons, or they would rely on shorter cooldowns that used to be available for Discipline Priest, but they all got changed, because you have to remember, Mind Blast activates Schism. You have to remember, Shadow Covenant is activated by Shadow Fiend or Mindbender. There has been a pruning of abilities, and I am all for the pruning of Discipline Priest, because in my opinion, Discipline Priest feels a lot easier to play, and the setup times, honestly, when I play live service right now and I have to press Shadow Covenant or I have to press Schism, it just feels like, why? I am fully behind these changes in terms of pruning Discipline Priest, in terms of removing some of these abilities, because they should not be there. They just make the class more clunky and not as interesting to play. I do think there's going to be a lot of players who are going to be against the smite spam, because there's so much Smite has such a bigger priority right now because, for example, Wheel and Woe. I was trying out Wheel and Woe as a talent and I had a decent time. Again, your tier set bonus is all about Smite. There's going to be a lot more Smite usage if you want to optimize your Discipline Priest, but I'm not really against that. Now, in terms of your Shadow Covenant and in terms of your Shadow Fiend, in terms of your Mind Bender and things like that, you can see here they removed Embrace of Shadows has been removed. So that means, again, the general consensus, the uptime of your Shadow Covenant is going to be lower if you're playing week 2. And you can see they're actually adding different types of gameplay in terms of what you want to do, Shadow Fiend or Mindbender, because Shadow Covenant now grants 10% shadow damage and healing increase with Mindbender, or 25% with Shadow Fiend. Used to be 25% with either one. But you still have to remember, because Embrace Shadow has been removed, you most likely will be picking up Twilight Corruption. Again, depends on which build you're running, but Twilight Corruption is going to increase Shadow Covenant's effectiveness by an additional 10%, which means that if you do run Shadow Covenant, it's going to give you 20% shadow damage and healing increase with Mindbender, or 35 with Shadow Fiend if you have Twilight Corruption selected, which you probably will, at least I was, based on my testing. If you're running Mindbender, you're going to have more frequent Shadow Covenant windows, but they're not going to be as powerful. Or if you run Shadow Fiend, you're going to have less frequent Shadow Covenant windows, but they're going to be more powerful. So it really depends how you want to play. I don't know what the best talent build is going to be for Discipline Priest because there's just so many. For example, they buffed Ultimate Penitence. So I tried out Ultimate Penitence, I tried out Mindbender, I tried out Shadow Fiend, I tried out Wheel and Woe. I did not try out Expiation because it wasn't really working properly. And I ran like multiple different builds. I don't know what the best build was because I need to do more testing because Discipline Priest is going through so many changes. But I really enjoyed how Discipline Priest was playing. Again, I do miss instant cast radiances a lot, but I also feel that the setup time to do damage or to provide healing through damage and things like that felt a lot less clunky, and therefore it's not a deal breaker. I don't think instant cast radiances is an absolute deal breaker. Would I like it to come back? Yes. But would I stop playing Discipline Priest because of that? No. I think Discipline Priest damage, I think Discipline Priest right now is probably the best DPS healer. I think the damage you can do, again, there's probably going to be better DPS builds out there in terms of providing, but if you like damage as a healer, Discipline is pumping. And if healing is going to become something that, again, we'll have to see how healing is going to feel, but if you're looking for a DPS healer, again, Discipline is in a really good spot. I do think that atonements move bars. I do believe atonements move bars, and I think that's very, very interesting to see because it's the same like Resto Druid in terms of HOTS actually moving bars, and you can see people getting healed up. I really enjoy Discipline Priest. I'm probably going to be placing this somewhere in A tier right now because I do know there's a simplified gameplay. I don't mind the Smite spam, but I do think there is a honeymoon period right now because I think it feels like a new class. I think the setup times are a lot easier. I think there has been significant nerfs to Priest utility in terms of Master Spell, in terms of PI and things like that. I think we have to look at the utility of Priest in general because you don't provide an interrupt. You don't really have a lot of like stops and things like that as a Priest. So we'll have to look at Priest utility in the future because we'll see how the dungeons are going to work, but right now, I think in terms of the healing that it provides, I think there's multiple different builds. I don't know what the best build is right now, but I had good time with almost all of them. I think there's multiple different builds you can play. I think the damage of Discipline Priest is the highest out of all the healers, depending on how you're going to play and depending on which build you're playing. I think your atonement healing can actually move bars and you can provide a lot of healing. So far, I'm liking the changes. I think Discipline Priest could definitely improve or could go S tier depending on, again, there's a couple of other talents that could be fixed, could be integrated a little bit better. I think there's a lot of improvements that could happen for Discipline Priest, but I think majority of the time, if you're a new player who never played Discipline Priest, I think you're going to like these because Discipline is becoming much more approachable than before, especially in raid situations where you would have an insanely long series of buttons that you would have to press in the exact order in order to provide good HPS. Let me know how you feel about the Discipline. Let me know how you feel about the rework and the simplification of the class. So let's go to Holy Priest in terms of the changes. And there's a lot of nerfs in terms of what's happening to Holy Priest. And I think a lot of people are going to be kind of questioning, again, some of these changes. So first of all, Flash Shield and Heal buffs, or with Flash Shield and Heal buffs, Trail of Light was overperforming, so they're nerfing Trail of Light. Now, unfortunately, the first week, I did not get to try out something like Lightweaver's build, because remember, Lightweaver's build is all about Flash, Shield, and Heal, and things like that. I did not get to test that out. I did not get to see the overperforming of Trail of Light and things like that, so I'm not sure how overperforming it was in Mythic Plus content, because I was running Miracle Worker build, because I wanted to see how the multiple charges of your Holy Word spells is going to synergize with your tier set bonus. Now, I'm not a big fan of Holy Priest tier set because of how random it is and things like that. Haven't tested Holy Priest in raid, so I have no idea how any of these changes or how the tier set is going to impact you in raid situations because I just didn't have the time. In terms of prayer mending, healing has been decreased. Prismatic Echoes now increases the healing of Echo of Light by 4-8 instead of 6-12, which is a nerf. You can see here we're making Echo of Light's periods faster so that it's more responsive. Honestly, making Echo of Light more responsive is a pretty big boon to the class. I'm a big fan of this. I think making it a lot more responsive and things like that is a right way or the way to go, and I'm assuming that they're nerfing Echo in terms of this change, because you can see here Echo of Light heals every 2 seconds and lasts 4 seconds and things like that, so they're trying this out. So I'm not going to be overly negative about this. I want them to try out this Echo of Light change. I want them to see how it's going to be. Again, unfortunately, I don't have my Echo of Light healing from week 1, but in week 2, Echo did quite a bit of healing. Again, I did try Lightweaver build this week as Holy Priest, so I was running Flash Heal and Heal type of combo, and honestly, I could see the health bars move, and I was happy with this. Holy Priest healing is still a very much classic type of healer where you see someone take damage, you heal them. They also nerfed Divine Image healing as well. Dazzling Light and Blessed Light healing has been reduced. We'll have to see what the best build for Holy Priest is going to be, because they kind of buff Pontifex as well. But Pontifex, again, it's also RNG, it's critical strikes. And your tier set bonus is also RNG. I feel like Holy Priest is becoming like the oranges healer for a lot of, out of all the healers, because there's a lot of orangey elements. I'm not sure if Pontifex is going to make it as the talent or the go-to talent, because again, there is a lot of randomness associated to it. But in terms of Holy Priest, I still had again, I'm not going to be over negative because I like where they're going with Echo of Light. I like the responsiveness increase. I think that's the way to go. I did not get to try out Lightweaver's build before, but I tried out Lightweaver's today and I thought that was interesting. What is going to be the best build right now? It kind of sucks that you cannot pick up the main talent points at the bottom of Holy Priest tree in terms of Lightweaver, in terms of Divine Images, and in terms of Miracle Worker, because I think they can all synergize really nicely together. Lightweaver is getting additional buffs because your Flash Heal and Heal are getting buffs. Miracle Worker can synergize with your tier set, and Divine Images kind of sits there in between. And I think having to choose basically 2 of them instead of 3 of them can feel a little bit iffy right now. I kind of wish one of those talents would be like a passive talent for Holy Priest, and you could have the best of all worlds. But that might be a big ask. I still think Holy Priest can have a good time, especially if you're a new healer coming into World of Warcraft, especially if you like that classic type of healing where you, again, point and click. I think the damage, a lot of people are going to downplay the damage of Holy Priest. I think the damage of Holy Priest is very... I don't think it's bad at all. I think it does rely a lot on that Holy Nova, you know, Rhapsody changes, things like that. I think it does rely a lot on Ethereal Blaze. I love Ethereal Blaze as a Holy Priest. Honestly, the fact that I can just spread my Holy Fires and just go back to healing. I still think you can provide good damage. I still think you might have to sacrifice healing in order to provide damage, unlike other healers here. But that's just the bane of playing Holy Priest. I'm gonna place Holy Priest where it is right now. I still think I had a decent time. I still think it is a very classic playstyle healer where you, again, I think there's going to be a lot of healers or a lot of new healers that are going to enjoy Holy Priest. And again, Holy Priest or Priest in general, honestly, is one of the best classes to start your World of Warcraft journey, because you can start off with Holy Priest and then you can move on to Discipline Priest. And Discipline Priest, in my opinion, is getting a big boon in terms of being more appealing to new healers as well. So you don't actually have to start with Holy Priest, you can go straight into Discipline and enjoy that healing through DPS. If you're a DPS class coming into healing, you're probably going to resonate with Discipline Priest because you're healing through damage. So that's something to consider. So let's go to our last healer, and that's going to be Restoration Shaman. And now Restoration Shaman, there's been quite a few changes to Shaman, and I think there's going to be a lot of negativity about Shaman, and I think these changes are not helping the perception of Shaman in general. So overall, Ancestral Awakening heals now for 10-20% of healing done instead of 15-30%, and honestly, this is just baffling to me because at least I didn't get to test out Resto Shaman too much in raids, but Ancestral Awakening for a 2-point talent in Mythic Plus, based on my changes, based on my testing right now, week 2, was that it was doing around 4% of my overall healing. 4% overall healing for a 2-point talent is a bit cringe, man, and I genuinely think if Blizzard was looking at Mythic Plus, if they were just looking at Mythic Plus, because I don't know how strong Ancestral Awakening was in raids. Let me know if you played Resto Shaman or you tested Resto Shaman. this week in terms of raid performance, how much was Ancestral Awakening doing? But Ancestral Awakening in Mythic Plus after the nerfs was really not all that great. Pressing Chain Heal is just too expensive with Resurgence nerfs. Pressing Chain Heal doesn't really synergize with your 2-set bonus because the bounces don't really apply to Tidal Reservoir and things like that. So a lot of Resto Shamans were kind of getting acclimated to that Primal Tide Core or Riptide build. And I think Blizzard might be trying to introduce Chain Heal build again by nerfing the Riptide build. So they want the Riptide build to feel less appealing, and therefore you'll be more inclined to play Chain Heal, but Chain Heal build there needs to be some significant changes to make Chain Heal more appropriate. Now, in terms of, and again, Ancestral Awakening now prefers to heal injured players instead of always healing the low. I don't understand this change at all. I'm like, does this mean Ancestral Awakening is not smart anymore? Like, I don't fully get this, but I was just looking at my overall healing in Mythic Plus, and it just wasn't good. It wasn't good for a 2-point talent at all, and I was really upset. In terms of 2-set bonus now, has been adjusted. Tidal Reservoir now heals for 15% of Riptide healing. Done was 20%, but so they nerfed this portion, but it lasts for 15 seconds instead of 10. And then the 4-set bonus, chances to create new Riptide has been reduced to 5%, used to be 10%. Now this nerf is all to do with the fact that this tier set bonus, especially the 4-set bonus, is absolutely... this tier set is OP for Resto Shamans in raid situations because you can kind of fish. You can fish for those extra Riptides. You can apply Tidal Reservoir on targets by using, again, multiple different direct healing capabilities and then just fish for extra Riptide chances by pressing Riptide on them and things like that. Or you have targets with Riptide and then you're healing them with direct heals. Multiple different ways to fish for this. And this tier set was doing a lot of healing in raid situations. So they're trying to adjust that. What I think is going to happen, in my opinion, for Resto Shaman is that trying to balance this tier set for Mythic Plus and Raid is going to be an absolute nightmare. In my opinion, there's going to be a loser in terms of, hey, in order to make this tier set really good for Mythic Plus, it's going to be absolutely overpowered in Raids. You're not going to have a decent balance of this tier set when it comes to Raids and Mythic Plus. I think you're always going to have a loser here just based on how this tier set works. Based on my testing for Mythic Plus this week, the 2-set bonus was still very lackluster in terms of the overall healing that it was providing. It's kind of relatively hard for me to check out the 4-set bonus, and I didn't get to test out this tier set bonus at all in raids, so I don't know how it feels in raids anymore. But I genuinely believe there's quite a few negative things about Resto Shaman in terms of 10.2 changes. They're pigeonholing you. You're getting pushed into a singular type of playstyle, which is the Riptide playstyle, which promote the away type of playstyle, which I enjoy. But if you don't enjoy, you're going to hate this. The tier set, in my opinion, is going to be very hard to be balanced around Mythic Plus and Raids. I think there's always going to be losers, and in my opinion, it's probably going to be Mythic Plus in terms of losing out. And Ancestral Awakening nerfs were completely unnecessary, at least in Mythic Plus content. No idea what it was like in Raid, but in Mythic Plus content, it was absolutely not necessary. So I do think that based on a lot of the changes that happened this week, there's going to be a lot of players who are going to be placing Shaman as the bottom tier in a lot of content. I think there is a lot of Resto Shamans who are doom and gloom right now because, again, I talked about the fact that you're kind of being pushed towards a specific build. I like the Primordial Wave build. I like the Primal Tide Core build. I like the Ancestral Awakening. I like that playstyle, so I don't mind having Resto Shaman in B tier with the rest of the healers. Because I was still able to provide a decent amount of damage. I was still able to provide a decent amount of healing. And your utility is still there. Your utility is still there. But if you're someone who just plays Resto Shaman for chain heal, you're absolutely going to be going towards that C tier in terms of where Blizzard is heading. I think there is relatively scary times for Resto Shaman. In my opinion, I still think it's somewhere in the low B tier because I like the playstyle and still had a good time. But I think for a lot of healers out there, especially chain heal enjoyers, it's going to be in C tier. I would love Blizzard achieving a point where you can still use chain heal, but you don't have to spam chain heal. That is a very hard point to reach, but I would like, again, playing Riptide build as a Resto Shaman can feel a little bit empty. You're still kind of missing that one button to press. If they could achieve a balance where you can still press chain heal once in a while, but you don't have to spam it, and you can still use that Riptide build. If they could achieve a similar build where you could have the best of both worlds, that would be insane. But honestly, I would not hold my breath on this. If I'm honest, I would not hold my breath. I would be a little bit scary about Resto Shaman coming forward because I'm not sure where Blizzard is heading with these changes. Let's go to the summary of the video. And the summary of the video is that I talk way too long and make these videos too long because I can never stop. waffling about healers, but generally speaking, this is my updated ranking based on healer changes that happened this week. There's going to be another video happening, again, probably similar time. There's going to be a new updates again. Again, guys, let me know if you want me to continue these type of updates every single week around this time, because that's how Blizzard makes it out to be, because I want to test out every single change personally during the weekend, because that's when Mythic Plus is open. I think in terms of healers, I think there's already healers that are emerging to be as pretty good in terms of the Mythic Plus dungeons that I'm doing. I think there is a clear outliers that are, again, it's not uncommon or it's not unfair for me to say that these 3 healers, and I could be placing them like this, or I could be placing them in S tier. I think these 3 healers right now are definitely emerging as being pretty fun to play. I think the changes that are happening to them are pretty interesting. I think, for example, if you're looking for a melee healer that really feels like a melee healer, Mistweaver Monk is going to tick all the boxes. I think if Mistweaver Monk receives increased range to melee, I'm keep saying this, and I will keep saying this all the time, please increase the range of Mistweaver Monk melee abilities by a little bit, because if you can't stand in melee, your playstyle goes down the gutter. It's not like Holy Paladin. You don't have to stand in melee as Holy Paladin. Mistweaver has to, if you're running that fist weaving build. And if you can't stay in melee, if you can, again, spin to win is a real thing. And spin to win is absolutely insanely OP if you can actually achieve this, because it's going to provide a lot of damage and healing. It just needs, again, increased range to your melee abilities. Balor is a Bloodlust, and I think it could use some defensives, and I think Blizzard is looking at defensives for Mistweaver. So I am, again, hopium. I think this could be Mistweaver's year. I really, truly believe this could be Mistweaver's year, but there's been quite a few times where I get my hopes up during the beta of the PTR stages in terms of the healing classes, and then the healing classes just get neutered at the end. So I do have a hopium for Mistweaver. I think Resto Druid, again, I placed it in S tier, but honestly, it could be just placed in A tier with the rest of the healers here, because I genuinely believe Resto Druid and Discipline Priest and Mistweaver Monk are all... If you don't have these healers ready, or if you've never played these healers, I think these healers are definitely getting hyped up in 10.2, at least coming every single week in terms of the changes that are happening to them, or in terms of like what's happening to them in terms of reworks. I think Discipline Priest is really interesting in terms of what's happening to them, but I'm in that honeymoon stage right now because it does feel like a new class. I always wanted pruning in terms of Discipline Priest because it just felt insanely crazy, especially in raids in terms of the rotation that you would do. So I'm all about the pruning, and I think the pruning that they chose in terms of Mind Blast, in terms of Shadow Covenant, in terms of Shadow Covenant being procced by Shadow Fiend or Mindbender, they were the right options, I think. Talents could still be reworked. I think it's heading the right direction. And Resto Druid, Grove Guardians, if you're someone who enjoys Grove Guardians, and please check out videos, what is going to be, again, check out some streams. Grove Guardians are a big portion of your overall healing, and if you don't like the passive healing that Grove Guardians provide, Resto Druid might not be for you. But in terms of the DPS or the best DPS options for Resto Druid, we might have a new DPS rotation. And some people are going to absolutely hate it. We'll have to wait. We'll have to wait and see if there's going to be more changes. Preservation of Evoker, I honestly felt like I could place Preservation of Evoker in A tier, because I felt that you can do so much damage so easily. Your healing, again, if people are stacked, is pretty good. I think Spirit Bloom still kind of slaps in terms of the healing that it provides. I still think you can have a good time with Preservation of Evoker, but I generally believe Preservation of Evoker is going to live or die based on augmentation. And I think, again, a big kind of prediction, I still think augmentation is going to be used. We'll have to see if there's going to be more nerfs happening to augmentation, but I still feel like if you're playing Evoker, there is a very high chance that your guild and high-end content or your Mythic Plus team are going to be like, Preservation? Why not augmentation? And that's a tilter in my opinion. Holy Paladin, historically speaking, it's probably gonna be meta. Let's be honest, Holy Paladin is the golden child of Blizzard, but right now in terms of the changes, it's just been a lot of nerfs, and I think the gameplay might be heading a little bit more in terms of the hard style playstyle or hard casting playstyle, and I'm not a big fan of that. We'll have to see how Holy Power is going to work out in terms of, are people still going to be overcapping based on the fact that World of Glory received a 10% buff. Again, this is a lot of field crafting. I kind of want to give a couple of weeks to Holy Paladin to see where Blizzard is going to head towards Holy Power spenders, because I don't think Blizzard is finished with Holy Power spenders. I would place Holy Paladin somewhere like in B tier. I don't think I would place it in anything higher, because I think, generally speaking, I think Holy Paladin, it's not about the nerfs that Holy Paladin received, it's the fact that most of the healers received single target buffs, and Holy Paladin doesn't have a monopoly anymore. So you're no longer the monopoly of spot healing, which is honestly a good thing, because if you're playing in Season 2, Holy Paladin is it's the healer that provides insane amount of spot healing, and it actually fits Season 2 Mythic Plus damage patterns really well. In Season 3, most of the other healers actually have a lot more spot healing that they had before, and that kind of brings down Holy Paladin a little bit. That's actually one of the reasons. And again, Holy Priest, the changes to your mastery and things like that, I kind of enjoy the responsiveness to this. I'm still going to give a couple of weeks to Holy Priest to see how they're going to approach the mastery changes, because I think Blizzard is going to be testing out your mastery a lot. I do think that there could be a couple of changes made to the talents in terms of trying to pick more talents up in terms of, again, what is going to be the way to go, Lightweaver, Divine Images, Miracle Worker. I still think it's a classical type of healer, point and click. You can still provide good healing. You can still provide good damage. I still think you can provide good damage. Again, Holy Nova, things like that. Things like Ethereal Blaze, Holy Fire. They can still do a decent amount of damage. Your damage will probably fall if you're doing highest keys in the world and you have to focus healing 24/7. That's just, that's just the way Holy Priest works. But man, I think Priest in general is probably the best class to play right now if you really want to pick up healing for the first time in World of Warcraft, because you have two excellent options in terms of risk. Again, reactive healer, proactive healer, best of both worlds. And Resto Shaman, I'm a little bit scared about where Resto Shaman is heading. Blizzard seems to be nerfing the one viable or optimal build for Resto Shamans right now in Ancestral Awakening nerfs. That, in my opinion, was completely uncalled for in Mythic Plus content. Their tier set seems to have issues in terms of being balanced both for Raid and Mythic Plus, because it's either OP in one or not that great in the other. And I'm not confident in Blizzard trying to fix those issues. I really am not. And I like the Riptide build. I would still place it in B tier. I still think you can do good damage and healing and things like that, but I think most of the Resto Shamans are going to be looking at this and they're going to be relatively scared. So I'm going to be placing them in C tier purely because if Blizzard ever watches any of these videos, please spend more time on Resto Shaman. Please have a deeper look at Resto Shaman's rotation right now. Don't forget about Resto Shaman. And this kind of concludes the list. Let me know if you like to see more of these updated lists every week, maybe a shorter version of this, because right now it's just too long. I need to find a way to cut this out and things like that. But again, feedback is king. Let me know your feelings towards these videos, towards these tier lists. Again, they're not meta, they're based on my kind of testing, and I want to test healers every single week personally and then kind of decide on in terms of how they feel. Let me know, and I'll see you in my next video.